The first time I played Enshrouded, I was buried alive.
And if I
Wait, am I stuck? No, 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 no. Stop.
it was nice to meet you, man.
Now with the game officially released into early access, I've been evicted. Did I or did I not build a towering structure that may or may not have looked like it may have been doing something you'd see in a Halo game to my friend's house?
Betrayal.
Well, maybe. Did I also dig up a huge subterranean area cavern that looked a bit like a dungeon just to build up those stone monoliths? Well, yes. But that's only a small part of what made me so engaged and enthralled with Enshrouded, a game that is kind of at this vanguard of these new like MMO light games, these shared world games, which have a lot of the same kind of basic tenets that make MMOs themselves so interesting. A genre that is really growing at this point and will continue to grow in the next month with Nightingale, that kind of blurs the line between RPG and MMO. There's a lot to like in Enshrouded, like all of this. Enshrouded is the new survival craft shared world PvE focused role-playing game, which is a freaking mouthful to say, but it does accurately describe this new iteration from Keen Games that just released into early access. In it, you enter the world as a Flameborn, the last hope of an ancient civilization against the creeping Shroud. Not this Shroud, although they did make a little bit of joke about this Shroud on Twitter, which I think is, pretty good marketing. I'm looking forward to Enconage. I don't think they're going to be in any rush to make Enbeard Flynn did. Doesn't work, doesn't flow from the tongue. Enshrouded is a game with deep customization, interesting lore, less friction than most survival games, exciting action combat, voxel-based destructible and constructible environments. Yes, voxel like the things that were used in Everquest Landmark, and much more. Keen Games, the developer of this game, actually is making this game in its own engine. That's something that I really wanted to point out here at the very beginning of the video, because it's not being made in Unity, it's not being made in Unreal. Keen Games is making Enshrouded in their own proprietary voxel-based engine. And that may be one of the most impressive things because it runs pretty damn well. Now granted, I have a decent computer, so I don't always get the same look at performance as some people may. I used to have the shit computer, now I have a good computer. I've never really had the in-between. It's always been really bad or really good. But for me, it's run very well. But what drew me to Enshrouded wasn't actually anything to do with building. It wasn't anything to do with survival. It was to do with the more MMO RPG-like elements. things that I'm happy to report are there, though they could use a little bit of work, but we'll get to that in a little bit. There are some core gameplay loops in this new batch of survival games that are starting all the way back in Valheim that hit on some things I love about MMOs, namely exploring a world together with friends, completing quests, getting loot, and tackling major challenges together. And those challenges and that loot and those quests, those things were promised with Enshrouded. When you jump into Enshrouded, you quickly realize that a lot of work has gone into the beauty of the game, specifically the world. There are breathtaking views the moment you step outside of your vessel, a world that, unlike many games in this genre, is actually not procedurally generated. It's handcrafted with everything placed deliberately. Oh yeah, and there's fall damage. Wow, this draw distance is insane. Oh, yeah, that's expected. But there's not much of a death penalty. You just respawn and you have to go back to your corpse to get some of your backpack materials. Materials that are fairly easy to gather, easy to snap together, easy to build and to create with. Manipulating the very terrain of the world, reutilizing already built structures and building off of them by dismantling them. That's one thing to note in this game is there aren't build physics. There aren't, like, you can build what you want to build. Like the things that I'm showing right here, these structures that I've made, they're obviously lacking in some structural integrity. You kind of have to decide if you want things to look pretty or not, or if you just want to build up in the air. Granted, you cannot just go fly in the air. That you have to utilize things like scaffolding, which actually is a really interesting thing to use in this game to build that high, but then you can take out everything beneath it and it'll still be floating there. That also works for things like, you know, the trees aren't going to kill you when they fall over, which in these games, ever since playing Valheim, I miss that. I have yet to find another game where I have to fear the wood, which sounds weird, but we're moving on. I think when it comes to the building part of it, the world part of it, the most interesting part has to be the fact that you can just dig down into anywhere, just start digging, create things, and when you get deep enough, even the sound changes. It sounds different. It sounds creepy. You have little cave sounds. I even notice at times there's even a couple little animated spiders going across things. But as you do this, as you are digging around in the dirt, you'll notice that there's no ticking down requirements for food, water, or shelter. Again, there is a lack of friction. Instead, Enshrouded takes the approach of making these like bonuses, strong bonuses that speed things up, whether it's you harvesting things or mining things, or making combat easier and more accessible, making you more powerful. Speaking of combat, it's solid and engaging, even if the mechanics are fairly straightforward. You can dodge, you can block, you can parry, you can use ranged weapons or spells, and you can use the talent trees to specialize into different classes. Classes that can work well together, like in my little group where I went toward the DPS barbarian route and my friend became a wizard healer. Another friend was a roguish ranger character able to lockpick and destroy things at distance. It's also perhaps where I realized I probably should have gone the tank route instead to protect them rather than this barbarian DPS route. I just kind of wanted to be a selfish DPS, I guess, and wanted to hit stuff pretty damn hard. But that's also part of what really intrigues me about this game. It's whispers of class interdependency, how they work well together. It's clearly not made specifically to work this way, something easy to notice by just seeing how heals work currently. They prioritize a randomization of healing instead of direct healing. Basically, it works in a way that obviously it's made to work when you are solo, but it also works because it randomizes in a way that allows you to heal as a group too, just not very efficiently. But when I think about my crowning achievement of the playthrough so far, I can't really separate it from what I would assume a crowning achievement to be in an MMO. It's basically taking on a big beast with my group of friends in an interesting locale that feels a bit like a dungeon. We banded together in the midst of this terrifying city that had danger around every corner to take on this awesome Godzilla-looking creature. And it wasn't necessarily a difficult fight, but it was still a long enough, thrilling fight where I had to dodge out of the way of things. We had to beat on the creature for a long time. I was always spending most of the fight underneath it while my friends were peppering it with damage from below. I was getting heals from my friend as I got low, and we had people rezzing in and rushing in to fight. It was a fun and thrilling and engaging fight, and it's something that I really, really hope they have more of. But it was also one of the things where I realized that there is a major issue with the game. These fights are few and far between. These fights are normally one time. While I am excited with this sense of achievement, it does, maybe, and perhaps it's just because I've played so many MMOs, but the idea that it's just this one-time achievement, and one that, because of how the game works, you may completely miss out on your server because they're one-time events. I want them to respawn. It doesn't have to, you don't have to just keep being able to farm them, but just let me have that fight again. Let me even have specific things like, if this Godzilla creature, what if it drops some scales to make some armor specific to that? Those are some of the things that I would love to see this game really lean into the MMO parts of it, even if it's done on a server that can only hold 16 players. But if you have those 16 players, well, there's some bigger issues happening with Enshrouded right now. Okay, hang on. So me from like the future here, I had to come in and interrupt my former self, because as I played a bit more of Enshrouded, some of my biggest complaints about the game were actually kind of rectified. So I originally was under the impression that these bosses, like the Godzilla-like creature that I got to fight, was only a single time kill. It's not. You can kill it, like it respawns. Same with like a bunch of the other bosses throughout the game. You get to go and re-kill them, and they are still challenging. Like when I went and played again recently on stream, we went in, I was level 10, my friend was level 21, another friend was level 17, another friend was level 12, so like big level range difference, right? It was still kind of challenging, still like a little bit of a risk of falling to this. So it shows that some of the complaints, the fears that I had about the game were actually unfounded. The healing, that part still is a little bit a work in progress. Some of the talent tree stuff, I think I see more as a work in progress, like going the barbarian tree seems to not provide as much oomph as you might want. Some of the healing things seem a little overpowered when you get later on, though they're all still very indirect, like an ongoing constant regeneration. But the basis is there. The parts that you would love as an MMO player are there, minus not having any kind of social chat system at all. So you need to completely communicate out of game, but that's probably not a great part of it. Still, I just wanted to come in here and tell you some of the things that I had initially thought were not there, but after playing a bit more, they are. So that's cool. Now, all that said, this critique still stands, because there's still potentially an issue when you get into the masses of players. One of those issues with having more players is that the fights don't scale with more players, meaning it becomes potentially too easy by just throwing more players at it. And that highlights another place for potential. And the problem with that is the game begins with the idea of solo in mind and then adds on the co-op later. So you can still solo all these things because there are going to be plenty of players. Many players who enjoy this type of game love to play solo. And so they can basically take on all these challenges by themselves. And when you have 16 of that one person all able to do the thing, it makes it pretty damn easy. Speaking of easy, there's no ability to make the server you're on any more difficult or easy. If if players are wanting it to be simpler. It's one of the top things that players are actually requesting, is that this having some ability to change the difficulty in the game to make your server more difficult if you want it to be more difficult. Something that players cannot currently do. Other issues with the game include the lack of a weather system or any kind of life skill progression. There's no raids of your base, the carefully crafted base that add any kind of immersion or threats. Even the shroud doesn't really change or evolve. You can get rid of some of it, but it doesn't encroach on you. There are no threats that are beyond your immediate control. You are the one that has to go out and seek out the danger. And then you get into the issue of having only one instance of things, meaning that if you have a server with multiple people trying to play all together, if you want to have the blacksmith or the carpenter or the farmer or the hunter, well, they all kind of have to be in the same place, because you only get one instance of those NPCs that are very key to how you advance in the game. Which gets to our number one issue with Enshrouded, one that has been the most upvoted on their board, but that they're using to kind of try and like keep track of what's going on with the game and what they could add to their own internal roadmap. The quests in the game advance for the entire server, not per player. So that means if you have a server of 16 players, and one player is super into it and they just go out and finish everything, no one else on the server gets to experience those quests. They don't get to experience any of the lore. They don't get to experience any of the experience. They don't get to experience any of the gear, nothing. It's all done by one player. And that has been like one of the number one complaints. It essentially locks players out of content. For my fans of Everquest, it's like everything in the game is Caraferm the Sleeper. I think there's a lot of ways to handle this. Obviously, this game is meant to be linear, as most of these games in this genre are. But if they're going to be leaning into the world being co-op, reworking the quest system to progress individually, or making the quest scale with difficulty based on the number of players active on the server would at least lend itself more to co-op than the current system. There are some other issues as well that have cropped up on the board, like wanting to have extra dungeons or more weapon types like dual wield, which would be really freaking cool. But these are all, I think, the issues that are the most pertinent, especially the quest progression issue. It hurts the co-op nature of the game, as does one of the other issues: no in-game chat, text, or voice. That's fine if you're on a Discord server, but if you aren't, if you just joined a server, there's no real way to communicate. And if you want to help Keen Games with the priorities of these issues, I've linked the board down below, the board where you can go to upvote and say this is a key issue for the issues already listed there, or add your own things that you would love to see. Like for me personally, I would love to see like a subterranean lair. I still remember very fondly when Everquest Next showed us how you could go down by destroying the voxels, and going down was this new lava layer with like new enemies and things like that. That's the kind of thing I would love to see. Utilize those voxels in that way, so that when we're digging down, you can dig into layers. Like, so it's not just this broad perspective, but actually you can dig down too and find new and interesting things. There's a lot of potential here, which I think is the main takeaway that I got from this game. And I think that would tie into the thing like requests like more biomes and more resources as well, and just basically adding to the game. A game that's already really good though. Like, I don't want to end this with it feeling like, oh, the game is incomplete. I mean, it is incomplete, it's in early access, but it's still a very good game at this point. It is a game that it's outside of recently Baldur's Gate 3 and then the MMOs that I play. Like, I've been playing a shit ton of EverQuest, but they're outside of the MMOs and Baldur's Gate 3, it's probably the game that I put the most time in since it launched. Like, I have really enjoyed it, and I'm already like thinking how the hell am I going to balance time between Enshrouded and then with Nightingale coming up? That's so much potential. The game even has really interesting lore, kind of like a mystery that you're unraveling of like, what exactly happened. As you go through, you find notes from different people within the world. You find books, and the quests obviously tell you a lot of information. So it's an unraveling lore story as you play through the game, which is exciting as well. But there's one thing about this game, one thing that truly stunned me, that I would never have guessed in a million years. And it was tucked away neatly where everyone can see. It's still tucked away on their website. You see, Keen Games, in their past iteration, made an RPG that I considered one of the worst games ever made. So, oh my God, the dialogue alone, oh, it makes my skin crawl just thinking about it. You can see how I reacted to that game, Sacred 3, in this video right here on the RPG channel. It's mind-boggling to me that they are the same team, because Enshrouded is incredible. My name is Edward Flynn. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you for 10K subscribers.